Uh, I'm very sad to report this morning that the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, has died. We've been reporting over the past few days that she had been receiving hospice care in her home in Detroit. There you see her, an American legend, the 76-year-old whose career spanned 6 decades, a woman who got 44 Grammy nominations, won 18 Grammys, a woman who blessed us all with her music, bringing the country together, her countless chart toppers like Respect, like Chain of Fools, and of course, Natural Woman. Aretha Franklin has died at her home in Detroit. Here is a look at the remarkable woman and her remarkable career.
She was the Queen of Soul who garnered respect on and off stage. Born Aretha Louise Franklin in Memphis, Tennessee, the 4-octave range vocalist got her start at a young age in her father's church in Detroit. The incomparable songstress often credited him with nurturing her burgeoning talent.
Very early on, he taught me a number of things having to do with timing and phrasing and different things like that, and coaching me in different ways. He did say at one point that one day I would sing for kings and queens. He did say that, and I have.
Franklin won her first of many Grammys in 1967 for Best Female Rhythm and Blues Solo Vocal Performance for Respect.
It was a civil rights mantra. I perfectly thought it applied well. Everybody wants respect. Who doesn't want respect?
As a young woman in the 60s, she watched her father unite with Martin Luther King Jr. to fight for equality. In 1968, she would sing at King's memorial service. All we need is you, Jesus. The recording artist would go on to win 18 Grammys throughout her incredible career. She also took home awards for hits like Chain of Fools and Freeway of Love. Franklin was also ahead of her time with a string of firsts. In 1987, she was the first woman to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and 7 years later became the youngest recipient of a Kennedy Center honor.
Some of the things that have happened are unbelievable. Who would have thought it? Right. But nevertheless, it did happen. God is good.
In the 80s, Franklin adapted her music for a new generation, cruising away with a Grammy for 1987's I Knew You Were Waiting, her chart-topping duet with George Michael. I knew you were waiting. I knew you were waiting for me. So quench my desire. I'll be in your sight forevermore. With her voice and her formidable achievements in music and films like The Blues Brothers, Aretha is often considered to be one of the greatest singers of all time. In 2015, Franklin graced the Kennedy Center stage again, this time to honor Carole King. As she sang, President Obama wiped a tear from his eye. Her performance went viral. I can't treat it of the sweet. She also sang for Obama and Presidents Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton at their inaugurations. However, the woman who sang for kings and queens reveled in being good at the most important job in the world.
I've been a wonderful and a very good mother, and am a very good mother. That's what I am most proud of first.
A loving mother and a decorated diva, Franklin was most of all grateful for her music, her longevity, and her audiences throughout her career.
I think for me, it's the love of the music, loyal fans.
Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul, whose reign transcends generations.
There she is, Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul. Let me read you part of the statement that we just got from her publicist. Quote, "In one of the darkest moments of our lives, we are not able to find the appropriate words to express the pain in our hearts. We've lost the matriarch and rock of our family. The love she had for her children, her grandchildren, her nieces, her nephews, and her cousins knew no bounds." Let me bring in my colleague, my friend, Don Lemon, who had the extraordinary gift, Don, of knowing Aretha Franklin. You had her on your show. She was your friend. What are you thinking about her right now?
I'm sorry, Poppy.
Oh.
I just woke up and got the news. I'm so sorry. I didn't expect to have this reaction, but it's sad. And for the past couple of days, people have been, going to see her and reaching out to her. And, there was information that I knew that I couldn't really say because the family did not want that out. But, for the last couple of days, it has not been good.
Yeah.
And, truly, we have lost a legend and a good person. She said that she wanted to be known as a good mother, but she was a good mother to not only just her 4 sons, but to so many people around the world like me. She would just text me out of the blue and say, I saw something you did on CNN, and I'm just so proud of you. And you're doing such a great job. And to think that that won't happen anymore is just really awful.
Oh, Don. What a blessing she was to you personally in your life, to so many people. Stay with me, my friend, if you can, and let's listen to her, because, the words that President Obama has used to describe her, I remember when he said, "For me, she will remind me of my humanity." And he said that if he were stranded on a desert island and had 10 records to take, hers, no doubt, would be in the collection. Let's listen to her remarkable voice, her remarkable talent when she sang in front of President Obama and so many others at the Kennedy Center. Don, you listened to that. It was that performance that brought the President Obama, to tears. And you think about the young girl who started singing at her father's church in Detroit, Don.
Yeah. And for me, that, it goes back to the 60s. I'm a child of the 60s. I was born in 1966, and I just remember, this Aretha Franklin's music being the soundtrack to my childhood. At every family gathering, at every barbecue, every picnic, on the way to school in the car, on family vacations, when we listened to, Aretha. And there is no voice and no one ever that will be like her. Some people have a gift that there's music in their voice. They just open their mouths and the song just drops out. And that was Aretha Franklin. And she was unmatched. But I think that a lot of that also came from the church and her father, because, she grew up with her father in the church, Reverend T.L. Franklin. But that all came from the church. And you have to think about, there was no auto-tune for Aretha Franklin. She didn't need that. Aretha Franklin could get and play the piano and other instruments, and she would just sit there, and she was music. And it's hard to even think that I'm referring to her in the past tense right now, but I know what she would say. She would say, I want you to be strong, Don, and I want you to be the voice, and so I'm going to put on my best self, and I'm going to be there to represent Aretha Franklin, and we should all celebrate her very wonderful, wonderful, wonderful life. She's an amazing person.
No question. And you know what, Don, beyond the gift that you just beautifully laid out that was her music, it was the gift that she gave all of us in bringing this country together, right? And I just want to read something that that Meredith Artley, a woman, an executive here, runs CNN Digital, said and wrote earlier this week that stood out to me so much I saved it, okay? This is what Meredith said about Aretha Franklin. A black woman who sings about respect, about being a woman, a moving voice and a central figure in civil rights. And she said that her life and her legacy may speak to a need for some soul and some grace right now in turbulent times. Don, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that Meredith is exactly right. I know that I spoke to her regarding, what was going on in the country. Some of it she spoke about when I interviewed her last on CNN. I think it was in 2016. And we talked about criminal justice. We talked about police brutality. We talked about, African Americans being killed by police. And she felt very strongly about that because of her sons. And she said, raising black kids now, or black boys now, was different. And it's all out there on CNN if you want to go look at it. And she was very adamant about that. But the reason I'm saying that is because of her role in the civil rights movement. With Dr. King, she would go to churches and sing with Dr. King and sing for the movement. And she was very much a part of that. And in one of the interviews, I said, Aretha, I said, Aretha, you were on the front line. She said, I wasn't on the front line. She goes, I was in there, but I wasn't on the front lines. And she credits people like John Lewis, of course, and Dr. King for being on the front lines. But her music really played out during that. If you look at her, when she really came to prominence, when she went secular, it was at the height of the civil rights movement, and her music became the soundtrack to that as well.
Yeah. Of course, she sang, she taped to sing at the memorial service of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Precious Lord, Take My Hand, another moment no one will forget. Don, stay with me if you can. I know how difficult and how personal this is for you as well. I'm just glad we have your voice in this conversation. Let me also bring in Roger Friedman. He's a close friend of Aretha Franklin. He is also with Showbiz 411. Roger, can you hear me?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Tell me how you knew Aretha.
I met Aretha about 20 years ago through Clive Davis, and who was her great friend and her mentor. And Aretha liked to come to New York. She loved Detroit. She loved living in Detroit, but she got bored there easily. And because she didn't fly, she couldn't go to that many places. So she would load up her tour bus with a couple of family members and a bodyguard and come to New York for a week or 2 weeks to see Broadway shows, go to dinner. And she would call me and say, what should we do? What's the hot thing? And that's how we really solidified our friendship. And we had a lot of fun experiences going to see various shows, holding Broadway curtains because we were late. And she loved the theater. We went to see a show a couple of years ago. There was a show playing on Broadway called Baby, It's You, which was a review of music from the early 60s on Scepter Records. And there was a young woman in the show. We were sitting in the third row. There was a young woman in the show who comes forward to sing Say a Little Prayer for You, the Burt Bacharach song. And she didn't know Aretha was in the audience. And the girl came forward to sing and leaned forward, and Aretha started singing back to her from the third row. And I thought the girl was going to faint right off the stage. And that's what she would do. She embraced life, Aretha. She loved to eat, obviously. She loved to go to theater. She loved music of all kinds.
She loved to really live, is what you're saying. I mean, she lived this life fully.
She lived the life fully, and, she lived many lives. Long before I met her, she had her, great success on Atlantic Records. I met her when Clive Davis brought her to Arista Records around the mid-'80s. That's when I first met her. And she loved the second career that she had. And the only thing is that she wouldn't fly. So, so I would say to her, people are calling all the time saying, "Can you bring Aretha to Europe? We'll pay her $1 million a show." And she'd say, "Oh, I'll do that." And I'll say, "Really? How are we going to get there?" She'd say, "Well, there must be some kind of amphibious machine that we could get into."
Oh, Roger. Hey, Roger, stick with me. Let me bring Don Lemon back in. And Don, I know you want to talk to Roger.
Roger,
hi,
can
Don.
Hi, how are you? Sorry.
I'm sorry. Don was a great friend, and he and I attended many of Aretha's fabulous birthday parties.
That's what I want to talk to you, because you talked about how much she loved New York City.
Yes.
And those birthday parties, and she loved the Ritz, by the way. I hate to, she loved the Ritz-Carlton. We always had birthday parties at the Ritz-Carlton for Aretha Franklin. And Roger, you never knew who was going to show up. It would be, Aretha was the biggest legend, but it would be one legend after another. And she just ate it up. She loved it.
Oh, she loved it. We had Quincy Jones and Berry Gordy and Valerie Simpson and lots of famous, musicians. She would hire this great band to play in the lobby is a low ceiling. It's not meant for this, but she loved the room.
Right.
So we would have the Dizzy Gillespie band come in and play, and then she'd bring in, and sometimes she would showcase young musicians or new musicians or new singers, somebody she had heard somewhere that she really liked. And so many times, so many years, you would meet new people, and we'd say, "Well, how did you meet Aretha?" She'd say, "Oh, she saw me on TV, or she saw me here, and brought me to New York for this event." She really liked to cultivate new musicians.
If she saw you anywhere in media, if it was on television, if she heard about you on the radio or whatever, and if she liked you, she would reach out to you, and that's how I got to know her. She called me. She called someone and asked for my phone number years ago, and then started texting me, and we became friends. But I just have to say one thing. The purse. She loved her Givenchy bag, right?
Right. Well, the story of the bag is
that's where the money was.
That's where the money was. And
she wanted to be paid in cash.
And James Brown once told me that he had taught her this, and I think he did, because these performers so often were ripped off, especially when they were in the South, where they would do the show and they not get paid. So what happened was she would demand the cash up front, and she would not go on stage unless she had the cash. And they would go into the bag, whether it was a Vuitton bag or some kind of famous pocketbook, and her bodyguard would bring it out and put it under the piano where she could watch it during the show. And you knew that as long as the bag was under the piano, she was going to keep performing. And so, you knew she'd come back for an encore if the bag was still under the piano. And one time, this is about 7 or 8 years ago, there was something called the Dream Concert for Martin Luther King, the I Have a Dream concert at
I remember that.
At Radio City, and they had the promoters had not brought the money, and she was locked in the dressing room. And there were a whole line of people knocking on the door trying to get in, and the guy who was running the show had the headset piece on, and he came up to me and he said, "Can you get her out of there?" And I said, "Is the money in the bag?" He said, "Oh no, the money hasn't come yet." I said, "She's not coming out."
She's not coming out.
I opened the door just a crack, and I said, "Aretha," I said, the whole thing was supposed to be that Carlos Santana was on stage, and when he finished playing Oye Como Va, she was supposed to be standing on a spot to sing Respect. And and the guy was freaking out. I said, "She will not." So suddenly, this big flurry, they bring the money in the bag up to her. The door opens. She walks out elegantly and slowly and says, "Okay, let's go." And she just made it within seconds.
Well, what that says that's something about that generation. She's the same generation. She's the same age as my mom. They were born the same year, 42. Yeah. It's about that generation that came out of the Great Depression, one generation out of the Great Depression. And especially for African Americans, a lot of those artists were ripped off. And she was just fighting for her respect there. And she did that throughout her life, especially when it came to issues that affected people of color.
So, gentlemen, just
nice
let me
that we can put on that.
Let me bring in and stay with me, both of you, because these stories are such a wonderful way to remember her. we're getting some other memories in John Legend just writing, "Salute to the Queen, the greatest vocalist I have ever known." Valerie Jarrett saying, "An incredible gift to the world, that her spirit will stay with us in her music always." And then also we're hearing from the mayor of Detroit, who's also remembering her. And let's listen, you guys, let's listen to what she said and her music, her beautiful music at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s funeral. And then we're going to listen to some of her interview with you, Don. So first, let's listen to her voice.
Because when the wind and the wind drill outside, and all we need is you, Jesus, to linger right here.
Most people don't know how much work she did with Martin Luther King. She devoted
voice honoring his life and his work. And then Don, here she is with you, speaking to you just a few years ago about MLK and his legacy.
When you look at what's happening in Ferguson, what happened with police officers, whatever, do you think your songs were the anthem to civil rights, to the civil rights movement? So many songs were played.
Well, respect was a mantra for the civil rights movement. It was.
Do you feel we're moving forward or fast enough?
I think that we have come a very, very long way. We've come to the forefront in many fields, of course, entertainment, sports, and so on, but we still have a long way to go.
I had earlier in the week...
But we have made great strides.
You think so?
Yes.
Because you were there, you saw it, you were on the front lines.
No, I wasn't on the front line, but I was with Dr. King from church service to church service. I went out on a mini tour with him when he first started.
That's a line.
Yeah.
That's a line.
Well, I was behind Dr. King, and I was a very young girl.
Don, your thoughts?
Oh, I mean, what do you say after that?
Right.
She's, she was the queen. She's the queen of everything. She's the queen of that and the queen of keeping it real. And, what I thought was that Roger just kind of made me smile because during that interview, we had to put her bag on a table because, being from she was born in the South, but then, went to Detroit. It is considered bad luck to put your bag on the floor.
Sure.
So it was funny before the interview we were saying, I said, Miss Franklin, we got to get your bag. We have to put it on a table or chair. It has to have a place by itself because it's bad luck to put it on the floor. But I think that for me, that interview shows the humility. When I say you were on the front lines and she said, no, I wasn't. But yeah, actually she was there with Dr. King and the music was so much of the inspiration behind the civil rights movement that I'm not sure if she underestimated it, but I think she was being a bit humble right there.